In a small rural village in the Nigerian countryside, there lived a young girl named Adeola. When Adeola was only 12 years old, both of her parents tragically died in a terrible sickness that spread rapidly through towns in that region of the country. With no other family left, Adeola made her way to stay with her father's brother, Uncle Dawodu, in a village several miles away. Also living with Uncle Dawodu was his bitter and cruel wife, Aunty Amina. They allowed Adeola to stay in their cramped hut, but she had to sleep curled up on the hard dirt floor without even a sleeping mat. Aunty Amina forced Adeola to spend every day fetching water from distant wells, harvesting crops in the hot sun, pounding yam flour until her hands were raw, and completing other grueling chores around the compound from before sunrise until after everyone else had finished dinner. Then at night, Adeola had to cook dinner for Uncle Dawodu and Aunty Amina using the small scraps she was given. After serving them, she was allowed to boil some plain rice for herself, but often could barely keep her eyes open long enough to eat her small meal. Adeola slept each night, dreaming of her parents and wondering why the gods had cursed her to this awful living situation. The only thought that sustained her was remembering the Nigerian tales her mother told about how the gods sometimes tested truly good people with suffering before blessing them later. The long days continued like this, one after another, until 3 years had passed. On the anniversary of her parents' death that year, Uncle Dawodu allowed Adeola to observe the traditional mourning rites by spending the night alone in the forest. So as the sun set red and hazy behind the trees, Adeola took a small bag of rice and a woven blanket. She walked until she came to a tiny clearing surrounded by massive ikongo trees twisted with vines. Too exhausted to even eat, she curled up on the bare ground using her bag of rice as a pillow. Adeola fell into a fitful sleep on the forest floor, shivering without even a mat for comfort. Late in the night, she awoke to a strange glow filtering through the tangled tree branches. Rubbing her eyes, Adeola gasped aloud to see an apparition of an elderly woman hovering in front of her. The wrinkled woman wore a cloak covered in cowrie shells that shifted with faint clacking noises. Her white hair glowed from within like moonbeams. In a creaking voice, both gentle and powerful, the apparition spoke, "Dear girl, I am Yemoja, Orisha goddess of the Ogun River and protector of women. I have watched you endure such suffering since your parents left this realm. You face each day with courage and grace despite no kindness given by those who took you in. Your plight has angered me, but I am pleased you remain virtuous." Yemoja waved her hand, conjuring a giant glowing basket woven from river reeds. "Please take this gift, so that you may now live as your good soul deserves." Adeola took the heavy basket with trembling hands. Peering inside, she saw it brimmed with riches, vibrant Asok fabrics, golden arm cuffs and waist beads, rare kola nuts, blocks of precious shea butter, delectable honeybean cakes. "Thank you, great Yemoja," exclaimed Adeola, overwhelmed by the goddess's generosity. The Orisha gave her a gentle smile before disappearing in a swirl of sparks. Carrying the giant reed basket laden with gifts, Adeola made her way back to the village in the dim early dawn. The town elders were just gathering in the communal meeting area when Adeola walked up, finery spilling from her basket. Everyone stared in shock at her sudden reversal of fortune. Adeola recounted her visionary encounter to the gathered crowd. She showed them the magnificent contents that proved the gods had indeed blessed her. There was great rejoicing and celebration of Adeola's good blessing. Everyone praised Adeola and marveled at how the gods had rewarded her virtue. Everyone except one person. Aunty Amina glared at Adeola with venom in her eyes. She was furious that the orphan girl now possessed such fine things, while Adeola's own daughter, Yemisi, owned only threadbare wrappers. That night, safe in their hut, Aunty Amina raged to her daughter, "Wicked gods! They bless that useless orphan but ignore my only daughter. Well, I refuse to let that stupid girl gain such undeserved fortune over us." Aunty Amina devised a terrible plan, whispering to Yemisi, "Tomorrow night you must go to the same cursed forest and force the gods to grant you an even greater gift. And unlike than idiot Adeola, we will keep the riches all to ourselves as is truly deserved." The next evening, as the air cooled, Aunty Amina angrily shoved the reluctant Yemisi towards the forest clearing. She commanded her daughter not to return until given a reward from the gods. Yemisi nervously crept along the shadowy path. When she reached the small, open dell of packed earth surrounded by vines, Yemisi lay down. She shivered in fear, both of the gods' judgment and her mother's certain fury if she returned empty-handed. Before we continue, if you are not subscribed to my channel, you might not see me again. But if you are, then congratulations. You will be the first to know once I release new captivating stories. Yemisi flinched awake hours later when a blaze of light blinded her. Shielding her eyes, she gaped at the spectral form of an ancient woman towering over her. "Greedy fool!" the goddess booms, making Yemisi cry out. "You disturb my realm not in virtuous mourning, but because your blackened heart covets what is not earned." The air hummed with ominous power around furious Yemoja. Still, she thrust forward a glowing reed basket. "As is ordained, receive this and depart." The goddess vanished. Greed overcoming fear, Yemisi grabbed the basket. Clutching the mysterious gifted basket, Yemisi half ran from the shadowy Ikongo trees back to the village in the gray pre-dawn light. She snuck into the small hut she shared with her mother. Aunty Amina waited impatiently for her daughter's return. When Yemisi revealed the ornate basket radiating magic, they clung to each other, cackling with wicked delight at their impending fortune. "Quickly bar the door so no one can steal our treasure," Aunty Amina cried. "Quickly bar the door so no one can steal our treasure," Aunty Amina cried. They dragged a heavy wooden beam across the entrance. Crowing with greed, Aunty Amina and Yemisi threw open the basket's lid together, then screamed in horror. Instead of gemstones and gold, out poured a writhing nest of deadly vipers and scorpions. Aunty Amina and Yemisi wailed and stumbled back in terror as the creatures swarmed them, biting and stinging their trembling flesh. Hearing the horrific screams within, Uncle Dawodu and the council of elders came rushing to pound on the barred entrance. When there was no response besides the chilling cries, they broke down the door with an axe. By then, too late, Aunty Amina and Yemisi lay still on the floor, bodies grotesquely swollen and discolored by countless wounds. The gathered crowd of villagers gasped and made signs against evil at the terrible sight. As they watched the dreadful scene, the spectral form of glowing Yemoja materialized inside the hut. "Thus judgment comes to those led by envy and greed," her voice echoed. She reached out an arm, and the annotated souls of Aunty Amina and Yemisi drifted up into her grasp. With a sound like thunder, Yemoja and the cursed spirits disappeared. Adeola, now rightful mistress of Uncle Dawodu's farmstead, sold many of her gifted riches at the market. She used the fortune to marry Obafemi, the chief elder's son, in a joyous village celebration. Together, the blessed couple lived happily ever after, generously sharing their good fortune with all. The end.